Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Thursday, October 16th, 2025, and today we are talking about overwintering a new garden spot in a way that improves the health of the soil, onions you plant in the fall, and are radishes overhyped as a high profit crop? Great question, so let's do it. All right, glorious Thursday to you all. I hope everyone is doing well. We're still cruising along over here with good weather and all that good stuff. I don't think I did anything super interesting yesterday, now that I think about it. I mostly just tidied up some areas, washed some sweet potatoes. That was fun. Those should be relatively cured by now. That sort of stuff, nothing very interesting. Once again, though, the weather was lovely, and we had our final practice where we do the kids versus parents game with our older kids, which I think is an important way to end the soccer season, keeping it light and enjoyable for everyone and reminding them that soccer can just be fun. Also, did I mention that the weather rules right now? It does. It just rules. All right. So as is our tradition on Thursdays, we are going to take 3 Patreon questions to see where that leads us. As always, Patreon members, feel free to put your questions in the October show thread over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. And they don't always have to be, farming questions directly. They can just as well be themes. Sometimes this show gets a little dense with information. Help me to break it up a little bit and throw in a theme or two over there. As long as it's, I guess, vaguely farm adjacent, I think it's within bounds. So, or you think I can make it farm adjacent, I think that's fair game. Anyway, our first question comes to us from Brian at Snowflake Farm, who writes, quote, "Hi Jesse, bit of a hot one please," and they put a little alarm there. We'll talk about that in a minute. "I'm preparing to put most of my first year garden to bed for winter, and I've got a few options. I'm debating between heavily mulching them with hay, putting in a winter kill cover crop, or tarping them with silage tarp or some combination thereof. It's heavy clay. I mean, really heavy, like 2/3 clay to 1/3 sand, and no loam whatsoever. That's very low organic matter, except for weeds and crop residue I've tilled into the top 4 inches. For context, we are 6B, 7A, Southwest Virginia, and the ground stays fairly moist through the winter. Thanks, and still haven't missed an episode." Little smiley face emoji, end quote. All right, thanks, Brian, and amazing that you've heard all the episodes. I love that. And for the listener, I did answer this question right away over there because Brian threw in that little alarm bell. If you don't add the alarm bell, Patreon members, it just goes into the queue. So just FYI. Anyway, it's a great question. And as I told Brian when the question came in, not myself looking at the site, my inclination would be to say use a winter killed cover crop like peas with maybe some summer covers mixed in there, but maybe not oats, especially not this late in the season. That is a winter hardy cover crop at this point if you are in a region of 6 or higher. And I just mean if oats is small at all going into the winter, it will not winter kill. You really, with oats, you want to grow it pretty tall and then let it die in the winter. If it's not tall, it will survive, especially if you do not get hard frost consistently. Then once the cover crop dies, presumably in this case just the peas and the summer mixes, you could tarp that area until spring. If you don't have time to get that cover crop in, I would probably just go straight to the tarp, and if you can add some organic matter under the tarp, like leaves or compost or whatever, that might be even better. The thing with hay is that, well, it's hay, so all the weed seed issues would have to be heated. Heeded, not Heated. Right. Although if you had a way of massively heating a large amount of hay, you could probably get rid of the weed seed, but that would be really difficult and energy intensive. 2, it will make things pretty cool in the spring. The hay will, even if you add the tarp on top. Now, the tarp will help. So there is a world where haying and then tarping would work in some sense, and maybe even reduce the weed seeds, having the tarp over top by enabling, more seed predators like mice to get into that hay or whatever, but also by germinating some of the seeds over the winter, so long as the area gets moist enough, which in Virginia you should be good on the moisture front. It's always exciting to me just how many different options there are out there for managing the soil over the winter. So there really is no one right answer here. Any of those could yield a good result. I also think it's good to have your crop plan ready too, because if you're planning on seeding anything, then the hay is just kind of like out of the picture for those beds. You'd want to use mulch materials you can seed into, like compost, or ones that you can just rake away without too much concern of adding, weed seeds like leaves, which sometimes leaves do come with a weed seed issue. So that's just depends on where you gather them and how. Anyway, I hope that was helpful in some way. Let us know what you all think or what you all would add, commenters. Otherwise, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, overwintering sweet onions, maybe, BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. Renewal season is here, and the work you put in now is what brings members back next year. Ari Memar, founder of Farmhand and a guest you've heard on this podcast, has worked with regenerative farmers to create a playbook that turns renewal season into a growth season. One farmer, Melanie at Shake Fork Community Farm, brought in $40,000 in renewals in just 2 weeks using this strategy. Now, Ari and Melanie are sharing the exact approach in a free live workshop and downloadable playbook. Watch on demand and get the playbook at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's second Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Serge T., who asks, quote, "Hi, Jesse, loving your content. Thanks for sharing. I'm not far in Nicholasville, Kentucky. I do beekeeping for work, but also like to grow and experiment in my small home garden. Got some Walla Walla and candy onion seeds to try starting this fall for next year's harvest. You think it's worth a try, or should I be doing a short day onion with fall planting? I probably should be seeding something ASAP. Thanks," end quote. All right, another fellow Kentuckian, and as always, I'm just going to assume a BBN member. Go Cats. And as I told Serge when this question came in, we have had mixed results sowing Walla Wallas and others in the late summer. It might be at that point in September worth just waiting until the late winter to avoid the risk of bolting unless you have a tunnel. That said, it is possible to grow those Walla Walla sweet onion types here in Kentucky Zone 6B, and we have had some success in the past growing them in the field. First, you definitely do have to choose onion seed that makes sense in your area. In Kentucky, we fall within the Walla Walla range, but just barely. They are typically bred as long day onions, which means further north than us for the most part. But, for instance, the variety sold at Johnny Selected Seeds right now is bred for the 35th to 55th parallel. We're the 38th, so score. Candies are an intermediate day onion and tend to do great here, though I also usually start those in the late winter. So you can directly sow them into the ground or transplant them, but you want to do that before it starts to get too cold to allow for good root establishment. Generally, this is done in late summer. I'm not sure how late you can get away with planting them, and maybe the comment section can provide some insight on what has worked in what regions. I like starting them and most things in trays and then transplanting them because you get the proper spacing. 6 inches apart is what we usually go with. That's like 15 centimeters. And you can make sure the bed is completely weed-free when they go into the ground. The last point is important because there will be plenty of fall weeds to contend with, for sure. But the spring weeds are also going to have their crack at spoiling your blooming onions, of which I've made many as a teenage employee and overachiever in the kitchen of Outback Steakhouse. So shouts to that. Like, I haven't made a blooming onion in a long time, but I bet I could still kill it. For the weeds reason, growers who do Walla Walla types over the winter often put them in plastic or landscape fabric for weed protection. In a small garden, though, you can, likely just weed them or mulch them. Anyway, these onions are fairly hardy, but they have their temperature limits, though we don't often hit them here, or at least not for very long. Established Walla Walla plants can survive down to around -10 degrees Fahrenheit, or that's like -23 degrees Celsius, or thereabouts. So I guess to answer your question, yes, you can do the Walla Wallas and candy types over the winter, and in general, intermediate and longer day onions work here. I often, in fact, brag about how good Kentucky is for growing alliums. Garlic is super happy here in general, as are most of our onion plantings, including shallots, which are typically a pretty classic long day further north allium. For me, I'm often just starting our onions in the midwinter, but there is no reason you cannot, grow those and likely several other onions over the winter here. The challenge in the spring beyond weeds is just the bolting, as the temperature fluctuations we get here are quite weird, starting in January with warm spells, then a frozen February, and the warm, cold, wet that is March. That's all. It's all like one word: warm, cold, wet. If they do bolt in the spring, though, just cut those flowers off before they get too tall, and then you can still eat that onion. It just doesn't store very well. Also, in that way, if storage is the goal, there are better onions than Walla Wallas for that. So make sure to plant a range of onions for your different needs, and to ensure you get a good crop no matter the situation, and it lasts you as long as it can. Anyway, hopefully that gave you some things to think about, and growers can feel free to add their insight and experience and comments in the insight, experience, and comments section. That's also all one word. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will discuss radishes. Worth it? We'll see. Be right back. Be right. Second one rhymes. That's the difference.
Hey Farmer Jesse, it's Jen and Jay up in Madison or in Baraboo, Wisconsin, and this is our first year in our greenhouse in Wisconsin, Zone 5B. We've got peppers and tomatoes and tomatillos and sweet potatoes growing in here right now, and this is our second harvest post 3 frosts on October 16th, 2025. Thanks for all the information. We love your show.
Farmer Claire Coleman here from the Winter Growers Podcast. Did you know that I also founded Real Farmer Care, a nonprofit that supports farmer well-being? From my own experiences farming, I knew firsthand that this type of support was missing from ag, so I decided to do something about it. As of today, there are over 500 farmer recipients of a $100 self-care award, with more applying daily. If you'd like to help, each $100 donated supports one new farmer. Visit realfarmercare.com to donate and learn more. Again, that's realfarmercare.com.
All right, our third and final Patreon question of this Thursday comes to us from Richard Schuler, who writes, quote, radishes are a disappointment. There, I've said it. I've seen too many videos extolling the profitability of radishes and Heracuri turnips. Here's what I've found. 1, they split if it rains. 2, the seeds wash away. 3, there is an incredible variation in size, meaning that there will always be some left in the field when the rest have gone to market. 4, pest pressure. 5, you have to pick them on your knees. And most importantly of all, there is a limited growing season. I've noticed that the people who promote radishes the most live in places like Quebec, New York, Vermont, or Maine. Here in the upper south, I can only have radishes for 40% of the growing season. Even under the best circumstances, I can only sell about 60% of a bed of radishes. Do you have any experience with growing radishes in the spring to sell them in the summer? How would you store them? Is it the same as storing carrots? End quote. All right, great questions here. So radishes, there are a few different types of radishes, obviously, ranging from 25 to 30-day maturity radishes to the 70-plus day maturity for your storage radishes. The radishes that most growers recommend in terms of profitability are the fast-growing ones like the French breakfast radish, Sora, etc. Those 30-ish days to maturity ones are among the fastest crops you can grow that aren't like microgreens or something. That said, they aren't really a storage radish. They will last, if you remove the greens, maybe a couple weeks in decent condition. This is, however, a good crop in the sense that very few other crops will start generating revenue so quickly, assuming you can sell them. But let's try and touch on all of your points directly so I don't miss any. Concern number 1 was that radishes and presumably your turnips split if it rains. This is probably due to maybe underwatering leading up to the rain and or maybe some uneven water distribution. They need good consistent moisture throughout their production all around, the whole bed needs to stay moist. It could also be that you are allowing them to get a little too mature before you harvest them, and or it may be, excessive nitrogen causing the splits, though with the dense planting, I'm less likely to assume it's the nitrogen. Your second concern is that the seeds wash away, but that is probably more of a garden drainage issue than a radish issue. If the radish seeds are washing away, so too are basically any seeds you are seeding. I feel you though. Sometimes you can do everything right in a garden and you just get a massive rainfall and the rows immediately wash out. It's a bummer. Point 3 was that there is an incredible variation in size, meaning that there will always be some left in the field when the rest have gone to market. Now, this is generally a spacing issue, but I run into this sometimes as well. Usually the first harvest is a little more selective, and then the next week we just haul up, all of them out, even if they are not fully sized up. Maybe one thing that could help with that is to open up the spacing a little bit in the row, which I admit is easier to do with something like the Jang than the Earthway. If you're using an Earthway, just give more space between the rows, and that should help, with consistency. Issue number 4 is pest pressure. The South is a tough place to grow much of anything that other people get to grow in the world, but especially brassicas. We just have so many brassica pests, too hot of nights, too long of a season. It's just a challenge. So for radishes, we find it's almost always imperative to cover them with insect netting for all but the late fall and early spring. Point number 5 was that you have to pick the radishes on your knees. And yeah, that without, raised beds, there is not a whole lot you can do about that. If you have 30-inch beds or thereabouts, you can straddle for a while. But having some mix of knees and straddling in your harvest plan is going to be about the only option for radishes. You also mentioned that, most importantly of all to you, there is a limited growing season. Well, yes, but maybe not. It may be hard for you in your climate, but at least here in Kentucky, they can technically be grown, from March until December. What we find is that we can grow the fast radishes really well early. Then in May, the market dives because it gets saturated and the green, lots of people bring their radishes and the greens get huge from the excessive sunlight when you plant them closer to the solstice like that. So we tend to back off of planting radishes at that point until like late June when the market returns in the summer and the daylight starts to, go back down instead of keep going up. And then other people in the market are usually backing off at that point. The storage radishes, for their part, can be a good crop for the fall, like the watermelon radishes, but those are, longer seasons. You just have to account for a longer maturation. We usually plant those in like July with an expectation of harvesting in September/October. Storage radishes will store for quite a while, maybe not as long as carrots, but like carrots, if the greens are removed and storage temperatures and humidity are met, which would be like 32 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 0 degrees Celsius, and 95% relative humidity, that can get you 2-ish months or so in storage. So that can be an option in terms of, storing radishes. I like radishes as a crop. I like them for the color, and when done right, it is harder to get any other crop that quickly with that many bunches out of a single bed. So for farmers markets, they can really add not only a nice little profit, but a lot of flair to the market booth. Are they my favorite crop to grow? Not necessarily, not really. But they do play a role, especially in a market garden, and they do bring in a nice profit compared to what they cost to produce and how fast they produce. What say you all? Otherwise, Thursday is in the books. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. That includes being a Patreon member, but we have other ways to donate in our, I always want to say comment section. I think it is our show notes. Double check me on that. Anyway, please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music and Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. I'm going to forego the water. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soul Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of October, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Daniel Moore and Deep Hollow Farm. Shouts to you all. I like it when farmers put their farm on there. That's very fun. All right, so as you will remember, our hero this week is Raj, lifelong dancer, swing dancer, who lost his legs in a car accident, but who has settled into a life of dancing from his chair. And it's kind of opened his eyes to, what it's like to have, some challenges like that. In the back of his mind, however, is this opportunity a doctor had told him about, and so he decides to call the number on the back of the card that the doctor gave him, and is given directions to this office kind of outside of the city. Now, there's nothing abnormal about this office. It's the type of office you drive by every day in the suburbs, of a large city, and you never really notice it. But when Raj walks in is when he notices it's different. There is a plant-like smell, but no plants. There's just one receptionist, and he kindly ushers Raj back to a waiting room. A man, presumably a doctor, walks in behind and starts to tell Raj about what they do. It's experimental, he says. I'm going to be straight with you on that. And there is no guarantee it's going to work. Then he explains to Raj something about, like photosynthesis and oxalotl DNA, blah, blah, blah. But your legs, he insists, will grow back perfectly, or they should, with nerves and muscles fully functional after some rehabilitation. And then, he tells Raj to go home and sleep on it, and Raj sleeps on it, and he decides the next day to give it a whirl for science, and so maybe he could dance again one day. And that is for tomorrow on Getting Leggy, right? See, because it's like a plant thing, but I don't know how it relates to oxalotls. Figure that out later. Thanks for watching and or listening. We'll see you tomorrow for Feedback Friday. Bye.